I think most of us have been there as parents. Your kid has something that they are struggling with. You try to encourage them to work on it or require them to do a certain amount of practice, and you're met with whining, refusal, or the full on meltdown. Or maybe they begrudgingly do it, but they aren't very engaged, so you aren't sure if they're getting much out of it.
Oh, yes. This can be such a hard line to walk as a parent. You want your kid to get better at things, they need some extra help, but you also don't want to hurt their self esteem or start a power struggle. Or I don't know if you've ever been here, but I certainly have, where you're like, we're going to practice every day. And then you are hit with resistance and then you backpedal. And so then you're like being inconsistent. Just the whole thing can feel really sticky because you know practice is important, but you also, who wants another
Another
refusal,
battle.
meltdown, whining
Yeah.
situation, right? Like,
Yep.
yeah. So today we're going to talk about ways to kind of step around that, sidestep it, and help your kids target specific areas of need without making them like sit for a really long time or do excessive amounts of work they don't enjoy. Hopefully the activities can be fun or at least suck less.
Yeah.
Targeting reading skills, math skills, rating skills, fine motor skills. Could I say skills again? Anyways, so we're going to talk about each of these areas and give you specific examples and activities and games that you can use to maybe, hopefully, make this a little more fun and a little less meltdowny. Welcome to Parenting Neurodivergent Humans. I'm Dr. Morgan Beidelman. I'm a psychologist, former teacher, parent to two kids, one of whom is neurodivergent, and I am neurodivergent myself.
And I'm Brianne Colpitz. I'm a school psychologist, parent to two neurodivergent kids, and I'm ADHD, which means I'm autistic and have ADHD. Okay, before we jump in with specific ideas and activities that you can do with your kids, let's talk a little bit about why this comes up so often in neurodivergent kids and families. As we've talked about before, most neurodivergent people have a version of a star or a spiky profile. And this means that, like the shape of a star, they have more pronounced peaks and valleys than most people. So, this means that more so than their peers, neurodivergent kids often have areas where they really excel and areas of strength, and then areas that they really struggle in areas of challenge. These areas of struggle are often connected to a disability, and they're not going to be made up by working a little harder or practicing a little more. Okay. You can't outwork a disability. And kids pick up on that. They know that if they work on spelling more than anyone in their class and they're still the worst speller. So they notice that their handwriting is not like everyone else's or that they are struggling to fit in. So they're already aware of this.
Mhm. I think it's important background that many of our kids, when we ask them to do work on something that they struggle with, while we may think that it's not a big deal, it can really strike a nerve for them.
Yeah.
It can make them feel bad about it, or, they don't like really understand the depths of the struggle. Like they don't understand why they're struggling with it. So they feel like there's something wrong with them. Air
Right.
quotes here. By now, hopefully, you know our beliefs. There's nothing wrong with kids, but we want to be really careful that we are not inadvertently, accidentally sending that message or reinforcing that message because they're definitely receiving it in lots of other ways all the time, or giving that message to themselves, right?
Yep. Yep.
And for our high masking kids, they often also are very good at using the things that they're really good at. If we're thinking about that star profile, they're using the tips of their stars to cover up the valleys or the harder parts, right? That's kind of that where that masking is coming in. So when we dive in and we go and we're like, we're going to isolate this struggle and work on it, it can feel really uncomfortable or even unsafe. And so
Yeah, for
that
sure.
can be part of the reason that we see those big behaviors or the meltdowns or all of that, because it's an area of vulnerability for our kids.
Yeah. Right. So it's important to understand that and be aware of that. So the idea of the star profile, the spiky profile, and it's another reason we advocate for telling your child about their neurodivergence and helping them understand how their brain works. But another thing we can do is to help kids work on skills that they are struggling with in a more fun and easy way. So let's
I
get
love
into it.
this. I'm sorry, I'm jumping in, but I love this for many reasons. And one is the reduction of meltdowns, obviously. Two is that it helps kids shift the way that they think about the hard things. Like hopefully that's a mindset they can take later on in their life is like, how can I make this hard thing a little less hard or a little more manageable? And the third is that when we add fun into learning, we actually speed up the learning process. So, yay for making learning fun.
Yes, yay. Yay for fun. Also, if you're like trying to figure out how you're going to bring this up to your kiddo, the way I talk about challenges with kids is just like, yeah, your brain makes this hard for you. It's not because you're not working hard enough or you're broken or like something's wrong. It's just your brain makes this part hard. So we're going to have to work on it a little bit.
Love that. I think as parents, too, what we could do is we could then demystify our own challenges for kids. So, your brain makes this hard for you. Let me also share something that that my brain makes hard for me. Might be an addition to that that could be nice.
Yeah, and just, if you're talking about strengths, you just flip-flop it and it's what your brain makes easy for you.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
so think just want to give that framing in case that wording is helpful for people because I feel like it takes away the defensiveness of feeling like you're bad at something by choice. All right, so let's start with math because I think it's the easiest. I mean, not easiest skill or for my brain, but math is just wrapped into a lot of games. All right, so many popular games have
So
activities.
easier to make fun.
Yeah, and a lot of our games have a basis in math, and so if your kid would benefit from extra practice with specific math skill, you can probably find a game that uses that skill. For example, the card game War is all based on quickly comparing numbers. I played that so many times with my grandma back in the day. Racco and a game called The Game are all about ordering numbers within 100. So, figuring out place value but up to 100. Games like Skyjo and Adsomundi, Proof, and Prime Climb are all great for older kids and teens. They build mental math and problem solving skills while working on concepts like multiplication, prime numbers, and factorization in a way that's not only fun, but also logical. By learning through play, kids are experiencing the application of these concepts instead of studying them abstractly.
Mhm. Yeah, I love this for a family game night or, like, if there's a couple of times a week where one of your family rituals is to do something together like that. You can replace a different game like Monopoly or something, although there's value in that one too. But like if you know that one of your kids or maybe both of your kids or all three of your kids or whatever, how many kids you have are needing some type of skill practice, you can just swap out one of these games. It doesn't target your one child that needs it. Everybody gets to play it. And yet in your mind, you're like, great, so and so's getting extra practice at this.
Yeah.
Caveat to that though is if your kid does have like an accommodation in this area, so maybe they use a calculator, maybe they use a hundreds chart or whatever, I actually really encourage you to continue them having access to that accommodation in the playing of the game. It will actually help them solidify their understanding of the global concept instead of being focused on like the one isolated area that they're maybe struggling with. So the accommodation actually helps because it's a real life, like fun, practical way to use the skill. Using the accommodation actually helps build knowledge. And we want our kids to learn how to use their accommodations. That's why they
Yes.
have them.
Yes. Yes. So much yes to that.
Anyways, sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there,
That's
but
okay.
outside of games too, there's math offers so many real life applications. So things like baking to build measurement skills, or if they're wanting to buy things, having to figure out how much money they need to save and all of that, or starting a business and counting money or budgeting. In a previous episode, I talked about one of the kiddos who is part of our community farm, and not our community farm. It's a farm in our community. We don't own it or run it, but we benefit from it and try to help out in the community as much as possible. But he's like saving money for a trip for next year, class trip for next year. And he's got a whole thing he's got to do. He's got to figure out how much of what things to order and how much money he'll make and all of that. And there is no end to the value of something like that.
Yep. I mean, same with like a lemonade stand or, selling toys at your garage sale, which I talked about in a previous episode. It can build in so many great ways to practice math.
Yes.
All right. So now for reading. For reading, we have a few categories. First, reading itself. All reading is reading, and hearing fluid literature is an amazing way to build vocabulary and develop a love of reading. So, whatever your kid wants to read or listen to, great. Graphic novels and comics are more approachable for a lot of kids. So, this is all good. This is all good stuff. They're
Yeah.
all,
All reading is welcome.
yes, there are also tons of great kid podcasts that are building vocabulary, visualization, and comprehension skills for younger kids or times that you don't want your kid to have a tablet or phone, like maybe in their bedroom. Yodo can be an amazing way to give them access to audiobooks without access to the internet.
Yes, really quickly. Sometimes when I work with families, they are really focused on the skill building aspect of reading. So if they have a third grader who's dyslexic and reading on a late kinder or early first grade level, they're really focused on let me find those late kindergarten, early first grade readers. They need practice with reading. That is absolutely true. And they are a third grader, which means that we want to make sure that they're getting absolute access to third grade level content. And we
Yep.
can do that by reading to them. We can do that by having them listening to audiobooks. We can do that by listening to podcasts together. And all of that is really important for developing their comprehension skills because reading comprehension is predicated on auditory comprehension. So if you can understand complex plots and ideas and hold different ideas in your brain at the same time, or having conflict about some things that you're reading or wonderings at a more advanced level than you can physically read, that's okay. And in fact, that's great. Because what that means is when you're kind of like the mechanical part of reading, when that gap starts to close, you won't have a comprehension gap because
Yeah.
the auditory development is there, and that always comes first because as human beings we were auditory before we ever read. We were auditory learners and communicators before reading.
Right. So if you have a kid who's still learning to read, there's a switch from learning to read and then reading to learn. Like, still learn things, like that transition of what Morgan is talking about, like, yeah, still give your kids access to their grade level information, because the background knowledge and the ability to comprehend what they are listening to and making connections and understanding is like that reading to learn piece, and it's really important. So, yeah, really
And
good.
talk about it and
Yeah.
and question and
Yep.
all of that
Perspective
really
taking,
is
all the things. Yep.
yeah.
And then for older kids and teens, this might be listening to a podcast together, talking about it. It's a fun way and such an amazing way to build vocabulary and support comprehension.
Have I told you this? I feel like I've probably mentioned it because it's like one of my favorite strategies. But when my kids were kids, we used to drive like all over the place. We're like driving to football practice, we're driving to tutoring, like we were always in the car. And I imagine that most other parents are also in that boat. And one of the things that we did is we put our cell phones in the center console. Now, granted, this was before we had smartphones, but so we weren't using them to navigate driving, but still navigate driving. But, same concept applies here. And we used to use the car as a place to have those conversations because they didn't have to look at you. They didn't have to maintain all this eye contact. They could like kind of take a break and look out the window if they needed a minute. they're also it was time bound. Like, sometimes I think when we're sitting at a table with our kids, they're like, how long is this gonna be?"
When do I
But
get out of here?
yeah, "How do I get out? Save me." But when they're in the car and you're having that conversation, we're typically going places they've been before, so they start to estimate, like, how long we're gonna be in this conversation, and that helps because at first, they're probably just thinking about ways to get out of it for the most part, but or at least I'm pretty sure my kids were. But over time, because they start enjoying it more, and ended up having really, really great, rich conversations with my kids during that time, and it saved us kind of like this battle when we were trying to do something else.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so if you're looking for games in the reading category, there are games like Spelligator that are phonics based and a good fit for younger kids with learning disabilities like dyslexia. For facts, critical thinking, and categorizing information, there's games like Guess in 10. For older kids and teens, Catchphrase and Pictionary are also good options. One note here, though, that some of these games like Scattergories require spelling. Oh man, I loved a good Scattergories game with my family. Like we said with math, games are a great way to practice accommodations. Playing with a Google Doc open can be a great way to let kids spell check their guesses. The same is true for games like Bananagrams and Scrabble. Encourage your kid to use a spell check or Google words that they want to make sure that they have the right word. Not only will the game be more fun for them, but they will be getting better at using their accommodations that they need, which we are big fans of around here.
Man, I think I would have been so much better at Scrabble if I had had that accommodation. I always had like the tiny words because I never knew how to spell the bigger words. And if I'd had that accommodation, that'd
Yeah, your
have been
Scrabble score go
yeah,
way up.
yeah, for sure. Another area that I hear a lot about is fine motor and handwriting. A lot of parents are not not impressed with the handwriting of their child, and so in summer they often are thinking about ways to strengthen that. And a lot of them, myself included, used to have go-to strat. At least I used to have go-to strategies of like, let's sit down and let's get this handwriting book. I have a kid who is dysgraphic, or an adult who, when as a child, anyway, dysgraphic, and very much resistant to writing in a handwriting practice for 20 minutes a day. And looking back, how could I blame him?
Right.
And so we often think, oh, your handwriting is poor, then you need to practice handwriting. And yes, but also there's other ways to do this. So, pretty common need in dysgraphia, dyslexia, ADHD, and autism, among other forms of neurodivergence. But other ways to practice it can include different activities that really strengthen the fine motor. So, letting them do things like, oh my gosh, anything that strengthens those muscles.
Yeah,
So
like Play-Doh, like working with
oh,
Play-Doh,
yeah. Yep.
like
Yes.
molding clay, things like
Mhm.
that. Those are good.
Crocheting,
Yeah.
Legos, the, like, gem painting. One that I'm really kind of liking because it feels like a 2 for 1 is, I have kids on, my caseload who we're making Woobles with, if you've heard that
Oh,
brand.
yeah, yeah.
Not sponsored, but they're like these kits and they have them started for you, which is so nice. I accidentally undid one because I was like, oh, how does it work? And then I jacked the whole thing up and had to try and restart it. And oh my gosh, that was hard. So having it started for you, and there's this like little kit, and you can make, like, I'm making a penguin,
Yeah,
but like
they're
they're,
crochet, right?
yeah, they're like these little
Yeah.
crochet kits, but they have Harry Potter ones, and like, so there's so many of them. They're really cool. So that's like a really good way to practice that, but also you have to practice directions and listening. There's a whole lot to it. You could do it with your child. All of those, anything that's fine motor. So like drawing, painting are all ways to target these skills without making your child self-conscious or frustrated when practicing, that discrete skill. And also in 2025, man, typing is an important skill.
Yes, it
um,
is.
It's for everybody, but particularly for those who struggle with a lot of handwriting. So typing games or even just like messaging with kids back and forth are also really great ways to practice a great alternative to handwriting and that accommodation. If you are wanting to target actual like handwriting specifically, like maybe you're doing some fine motor activities, but then you also want to do explicitly handwriting work, might I suggest thinking about people that you love and care about either in your community or in your family, and thinking about things that you could say to them, and handwriting cards. You could type it first to get the spelling and everything right, and then you can practice a couple times and then handwrite it on the card. I would suggest using erasable pen or pencil so that if they do make a mistake, when they get to the final like card or whatever, it doesn't feel like, oh, I have to start all over, because that will end that practice pretty quickly. But I have some kids and some of our clinicians over at our other work at Reach Learning Services. They go around the community and like they'll go on walks with kids, and they'll like notice like cool things in somebody's yard, and so they'll go back and they'll practice and be like, I really love your purple flowers, and then go and just like put it in a neighbor's door or something like that. So that you're practicing it, you're showing kindness, you're building community all at the same time. And those are authentic ways to practice writing rather than being like, let's sit down and practice your handwriting.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, I love it. Feels like a random act of kindness, which I am all about those. If a card is overwhelming for your kid, do postcards. Less, less.
We'll post
Um,
even.
yeah, post it even less. One area that we haven't mentioned yet is gross motor, and I think that's because in our society we do this one more naturally. If a kid is struggling with gross motor area, say coordination, we kind of intuitively think, okay, they should do physical therapy and maybe a few specific exercises. But we should also have them out running, jumping, climbing, playing games, etc. Anything that they like and want to do that targets these skills. Doing PT, physical therapy, is great. Doing 8 hours a day is boring and probably counterproductive. You're gonna burn your kid out on that stuff real fast if you're trying to do 8 hours a day of physical therapy exercises. That said, if you do have a kid who would benefit from more gross motor and they are not interested in doing it, maybe because they already internalize that they don't like it or they're not good at it, thinking outside of the playground games and sports can be helpful. So, for example, swimming can be a great fit because it's easier to move in the water. There's less resistance while getting great full body strengthening. Swimming is also great because just playing in the water works all your muscles. You don't have to know how to do strokes correctly or be swimming laps to get benefits. You can also think about things like horseback riding or canoeing, or people are all about the stand-up paddleboarding, like on your knees or however, and that works stabilization and core strength while sitting.
Hmm. Uh, so many of those things are also just like fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. We covered a lot today. If you want to check out any of the specific games or activities that we mentioned, we will put a link in the show notes. None of this is sponsored. We just want to make it easier for you to find things that might be helpful. And so if any of these perked your interest and you're like, oh, I should remember that, you don't have to remember it. Just look in the show notes. And thanks for listening. We'll be back next week to talk about labels. Are they
Labels.
I know. Are they helpful? Are they harmful? We will talk about it. I think it will be a great discussion. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it.
And if we are a good fit for you, follow us on Instagram. Dr. Morgan is at Dr. Morgan Beidelman, and Brienne is at It's Brienne Colpitts. You can find the podcast on YouTube and Patreon at Parenting Neurodivergent Humans.
As always, if you have a question or topic you want us to cover, send us a note. You can message us on Instagram or use the Google form in the show notes.
As always, thanks to our editor and producer, Erica Carpenter. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Who knew? It's like time pressures help neurodivergent brains.
Who knew?
Someone should make a podcast and tell people that.
Yeah, weird. That's hilarious.
If there is one thing I'm good at, is doing it under pressure.
Under pressure.
Dun, 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 dun.
Dun, 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 dun. Just a quick disclosure, this podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute a psychologist-client relationship and should not be used in place of an expert evaluation or therapy.
Is this one of those situations where you're booking yourself the day after getting back? Like, are
No.
you gonna need that morning to, like, do it?
Nope. Nope.
Okay, not that I'm executive functioning for you, just
Oh, please do.